Hello, and welcome to the Susan Hollins podcast. I thought this would be a good moment to pause and say a little about this podcast, where it began, what lies behind these first 7 episodes, and something about the territory I intend to continue exploring here. Before the Susan Hollins podcast, there were Thresholds. Thresholds began nearly 2 years ago as a series of pieces about loss and grief which I wrote on Substack. I chose the name Thresholds deliberately, for I understand a threshold as a stopping place, a place of transition, where we look back on what and who is no longer with us before entering something entirely unknown. And this seemed to me to describe something fundamental about our experience of grief. For profound loss can leave us standing at such a threshold. The life we knew so well has changed, often irrevocably, and we don't yet know what our life ahead will look like, or, importantly, who we might or will be within it. Thresholds had another important meaning for me also. I wanted to create a meeting place for different ways of understanding and engaging with loss and grief. My starting point is psychotherapy and the experience of grieving people, which has always been at the heart of my work and of my reflections. Yet psychotherapy doesn't exist in isolation from the other ways in which human beings have tried to understand the big questions of suffering, loss, death, meaning, and our place in the wider world. My thinking is also interwoven with my deep-rooted spirituality and theology. I'm extremely interested in religious belief and practice, as well as in traditional and alternative spiritualities, while being immensely curious about psychic awareness and experience, particularly where these impact our experience of loss and grief. So on Substack, Thresholds became a place where different disciplines, traditions, and ways of knowing could meet, while the personal, lived experience of grief remained at its core. Eventually, my writing became spoken reflection, these podcasts, and the first 7 episodes grew out of those first Threshold posts. In these 7 podcasts, I've explored what happens when grief suddenly breaks into our life. I've considered both the silence and the wildness within grief itself, as well as the terrible experience of being uprooted by it. I thought about what I term the underworld, that wild, frightening and unfamiliar territory which we're likely to enter when profound loss tears through the fabric of our ordinary life and the old bearings and moorings no longer hold. I've considered too what happens when grief becomes private, when communal ways of recognizing and sharing loss disappear altogether. And most recently, in conversation with Tina Noldret, together we explored what we came to call the unwords of grief, feeling unheard, unseen, misunderstood, undone, among others. These first 7 podcast episodes belong very much to Thresholds. The podcast now has a far more straightforward name, but I haven't left the idea of the threshold at all. If anything, it describes very well where I want this podcast to be, which is at the meeting point of psychotherapy and lived experience, spirituality and theology, religious belief and practice, psychic awareness and experience, alongside other ways in which human beings try to understand and engage with what happens to us when we grieve. Grief is raw. It is gut-wrenching. I also understand it to be existential, for it challenges what we thought we knew about ourselves, about our relationships, and the wider world. It confronts us with questions for which there are no ready or easy answers, such as, who am I now? How can I live in this changed world? How can I make meaning for my life when what has happened to me feels utterly meaningless? These are the sorts of places I will be exploring here. Sometimes I'll do that through my own reflections. At others, I'll be joined by a guest, bringing another experience, discipline, or way of seeing things to the conversation. I've no intention for these conversations to be tidy, for grief is anything but tidy. I'm far more interested in what may happen when different understandings are allowed to meet and engage with one another around the complexity and profundity of grief and its impact upon us. If you've listened to these first 7 episodes on Substack, thank you for coming with me here. And if you've only just discovered my podcast, you're most welcome. If anything you hear prompts any response in you, I'd love to hear about it. You can email me at susan@susanhollinscounselling.co.uk, and you'll find my website at susanhollinscounselling.co.uk, and all this detail you'll find in the episode notes. Meanwhile, until next time.